to check about how many people has heard about Appium and did anyone tried it or not. So I was just launching this another poll. Can you please answer this as well? We can give another 30 seconds. Nice. I see if you have already tried Appium 2.0. It's good to see that. And I see a lot of no's as well. No worries. Shini and Sai will be talking us from the basics, and we can go through them. And it would be an interactive sessions. And if any questions are there, you can please feel free to raise your hand, and we can answer. It might be in the middle or at the end, based on the session time we have. Okay. I'm just ending the poll as well. So yeah, I think you can get started now. Hello all, good evening everyone. Thank you all for joining the 11th edition of vodQA Shorts Hyderabad. So we are all pleased to welcome you all. And first I'll give my introduction, and later on I'll hand it over to you other speakers as well as anchors. So coming to myself, I am Jagdish. I have overall of 4 years of experience and recently joined ThoughtWorks. I have worked on UI automation, API, as well as mobile automation as well. And that's it about me. And what do you say?
Yeah. Thanks, Jagdish. Hello all, I'm Sai Kaivalya. I have about 1.5 years of experience as a QA in ThoughtWorks. And I have worked so far on 2 projects, and it has been a great learning experience for me in both technical and non-technical ways. Yeah, so that's all about me. Over to you, Idala.
Thank you, Sai. Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Idala Asif. I am a 2020 graduate. I have joined ThoughtWorks about 15 months ago. Previously, I have worked in the telecommunication domain, and currently I'm in an e-commerce project. Overall, it has been a great learning journey at ThoughtWorks so far. So that was about me. Now, before we move further, let's quickly recall what is vodka. So it is a value-oriented discussion on quality analysis. The main purpose is to provide a platform for the tech community, including QA, devs, learners, and all of us to come together and explore various areas of software testing. Originally, this used to happen in Hyderabad ThoughtWorks office, but due to COVID and the post-pandemic situation, we have decided to continue this online in the webinar format. Also, it happens every alternate months, wherein our skilled speakers come up with different interesting and innovative topics. So today we have 2 such extremely talented speakers with us. We'll be speaking on Appium 1.x, end of life, what's next. So I would request our speakers to please introduce themselves. Sai Krishna, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much. Am I audible? Clear?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you so much. I thought I still have some glitch. Okay. Thank you so much, people. Thanks for waiting, and thank you, folks. Myself, Sai, and I'm with ThoughtWorks for some time. And what I do, right? I am a quality analyst in ThoughtWorks. I'm more interested on consulting and influencing side. And apart from that, I'm also an active contributor to open source, and also an active maintainer to Appium and Selenium and few other repos which I maintain. And over to you, Srini.
Hi everyone, I'm Srinivasan Shekhar, and I'm with ThoughtWorks for last 6 years and in the industry for 10 plus years. I'm a conference speaker, blogger, maintainer of Appium, and a mentor for quite a few folks in ThoughtWorks and outside ThoughtWorks.
Hey, give me a second. I know someone said they can't see me. I'm trying to see how do I add this background and then turn my video on because I'm on web and stuff. I think I got that. Let me see if you can see me. Hey, that's me. Okay, let me share my screen. Today has been quite a tech. Now Zoom's
I see
asking
quite
me
a
to
few
give
folks
me.
have worked on Appium 1.x at least, as per the poll results. So that's great to know.
Perfecto. Cool. What can you see now?
Not yet, I can see
Not
it.
it. It's not good. Now. Oh wait. It says please grant browser access to screen recording. Where do I do that? No.
Okay,
Hang
let
on,
me try
people.
that.
Yeah. See if you could. Meanwhile, I'm trying to see. Okay. System preferences. Select
That one has
Chrome as screen
suggested
recording.
go to system preferences and select Chrome as screen recording.
System preferences. In Mac or the browser system preferences? The
In the Mac.
preferences part. Okay.
I think Shini has shared a screen.
Yeah, I think we will get started. I'll try to figure that out soon. Okay. So, as we see, we did see that not a lot of people have used Appium 1. Like 2.0, but there were a few folks who have tried the hands dirty on 1.x, right? So as the title says, 1.x is end of life. So as a community, we don't maintain 1.x any longer, and there's active development and contribution only on 2.0. So what that means, right? If you are an Appium user and you're using an Appium 1.x, so what does it mean if there's an end of life, right? How do I move towards 2, and what are the cool things that Appium 2.0 brings into play, and what sort of to what level I have to look into our migration script and things like that. So probably we'll take this entire time to talk about those. And Srini is going to completely run you through now what's on 1.x, and then slowly we'll chip into 2.0 and what are the cool things that 2.0 brings in. Srini, you're on mute.
Okay, if I do a screen share, it goes to mute automatically.
It's not a good day for tech, man. That too with Zoom.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are.
Perfect. So let's do a quick refresh about Appium 1.x and how does it works internally, right? So
Shini,
many of you folks, yes, Jack?
unable to see the screen. The screen is black still. Others able to see the screen?
No, not me.
Okay.
I think, can you switch off your camera so that I think sharing.
Better, not better. The moment I start sharing, I'm going into mute. Can you folks hear me now? Is
Yes,
all
sure.
good?
Yeah, all
So
good.
I can start that. Cool. Sorry to make you all wait. So let's get started with Appium 1.x. Let's quickly review how does it works internally, right? So Appium 1.x has been there in the market for quite some time, probably 7-8 years now. And I got the opportunity to work on Appium right from 0.8. And now we are in 2.0 beta 40 version. So let's do a quick review of how does Appium 1.x for Android works internally and do a quick refresh about their architecture. So we all might have written driver.find element either in Selenium or Appium, right? So in Appium, we have quite a lot of clients. Like we have clients on Java, JavaScript, Ruby, Python. So let's pick something. Let's pick a language that we could write uh, any of our automated tests, right? So let's say we have picked Java and we started doing a driver, I mean, initialization and then finding an element and then accessing an element and then performing some gestures on it. So that's called our client script. And Appium works on client server architecture. This client and server talks in a protocol called W3C standards, which is a WebDriver protocol. And in Appium 1.x, it's not completely WebDriver protocol, but we also use something called JSON wire protocol for quite a lot of time, and few of the bits were WebDriver protocol. So client will send the command for driver initialization, then server recognizes that command, understands by going through the capabilities, it knows that whether I need to create an Android driver session or an iOS driver session, and the automation name. Android for Appium has two different backends. One is UI Automator 2 and another one is Espresso. So by running through the capabilities, server can initialize a particular driver based on the capability called automation name. And here for a picture, we have taken Espresso, considering the client initialized an Espresso driver session on Android. So it sends a request to Espresso driver for initialization out here. And then Espresso driver installs another server called Espresso server inside our mobile app. And then comes installing the application under test, and then the Android server or the Espresso server running under the device has the capability to talk to the application under test. So end of this whole process, it's the server running inside the device which taking care of communicating with the application under test. So if you have ever run an Appium test on your mobile device or emulators or simulators, you could see there will be, along with application under test, you could see there is a server that gets installed. If you have gone through the list of apps installed in your device, you could see there will be either UI Automator 2 server or an Espresso server. In case of iOS, you might see WebDriver agent. So those servers takes care of communicating with the application under test and instructing to perform instructing to perform a particular gesture or doing typing on a particular element. All of those things taken care by that specific server. Appium server running on our device takes care of this communication. As a whole, in a nutshell, this is how the client server architecture of Appium 1.x looks like. And 1.x comes with quite a few problems. Whoever have used Appium might have experienced it. Sai, did you experienced any problems while installing Appium, probably during your tenure of using Appium?
Yeah, Srini, some of the gigs where I've consulted, right, I've been an Appium user for so long. The problems that I've actually seen is, though my focus is to automate an Android application, right? So we end up using Appium. We try to install the server. So along with that server, it also brings you a lot of other dependencies, which is not required for me. For example, right, it gives you it try to bring you a Windows driver. It tries to get you a Chrome driver. It tries to get you a iOS driver, or probably a bunch of other stuffs, right? Or even in this case, right, the Appium Chrome driver. So my app which I was working was a pure native application, okay, and it was purely native, and I didn't have any needs to get a Chrome driver, actually, to be very frank, right? And on top of that, because I was working with a client which was behind a proxy, and to get Chrome driver installed behind a proxy is pretty painful. So I had to, like, get hold of, probably be blocked for days, because I had to typically go through this process, right? When you're in a client location and you have this whitelisting problem, so you raise a ticket and stuff. I actually was blocked for not that what I'm going to use, right? because I clearly know I'm not going to use a Chrome driver, Appium's Chrome driver, because mine was purely a native app. And that was quite painful. My focus was only to use Appium for my pure native Android automation, right? So that is something what was a big thing for me when I was using Appium 1.x, and I'm sure a lot of people can also relate to this problem, bringing in so many dependencies, right? So given that, right, Srini, as we are moving to 2.0 and so many drivers in place, right, like Espresso, XCUI, Windows driver, Mac driver, UI engine driver, there are a bunch of drivers that Appium brings in place, right? So moving away from 1.x to 2.0, is there anything that Appium 2.0 brings in place for us to get rid of this problem?
Yeah, very true. This is something that people have faced for quite a lot of years. When trying to install Appium, it tries to install a bunch of other things which people might not require at the moment. So Appium 2.x came up with a interesting thought process to decouple these drivers and install what we want. Let's say I wanted to run my test on iOS, as you said, I could just focus on installing a server, and then I can instruct the driver to install only probably iOS driver, which is an XCUI test driver, because I'm going to run my test only on my application under test is just an IPA, so IPA the app, so I could run my test only on iOS devices or simulators. So it's going to be a lot less painful in 2.0. I'm sure people will love it.
That's fantastic. So, which means that the problem which I was bumping into of not wanting to download the Appium Chrome driver, so I can get rid of that, right? So it's more like what I ask is what I get, Srini. Am I
Yeah,
understanding it correct here?
very
Right?
true.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. With that said, right, I've also bumped into another problem. Okay. I'm sure that probably I would want to also hear out or look out in the chats if people can actually see chats if they have actually bumped this problem, right? One of the another challenging part when it comes to Appium, right, is definitely running tests parallelly on your devices or emulators or simulators, right? And there are a bunch of things that we need to take care. Probably like you need to know which device is free or what's the kind of port number you need to forward. You need to keep that port number in memory. So there are a lot of complex things that we need to do to get things running in uh, parallel devices, right? So in this space, is there anything that Appium 2.0 can help us to get things
Yeah.
easier, right? Of course, parallel testing was complex or is complex currently, even with 1.x, saying that there are a bunch of capabilities, bunch of things that we need to look after, right? And a lot of client logics and client codes come to play. Can this be simplified, Srini, with 2.0?
Yes, of course. So Appium, as I said, there is some architectural changes required
Is it only me who lost Srini, or
Yeah.
sorry, Srini, your screen's gone and we can only hear you. Okay, we
we
lost him.
have built on client can be
Uh,
offloaded.
Sorry, Srini, can I stop you here? We lost you for like few seconds. Your screen's turned off, and we didn't hear anything from you. Can you like please start back from last 15 seconds after I cut off?
Sure. I hope it's clear now and hope
Yeah,
people are able
yeah,
to hear me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So to continue or to summarize, right? It's definitely a lot of intelligence required for someone to build a device farm, handling how many number of devices connected and port forwarding. And then it needs a lot of heavy lifting on client side. Appium 2.0 came up with an interesting concept called plugin. We will go deep dive on plugin a little later, but with the help of plugin, we could offload a lot of intelligence, the heavy lifting that is required at the client side, which is what we are day in, day out, we are dealing with. So that can be offloaded from client, and then given as a responsibility to a server, a small piece of code. You could do it as a small piece of code and then run it along with servers so that you don't have to worry about it. So definitely that the client scripts is going to be a lot more simpler. The framework that you could build can be a lot more simpler than ever before, because that intelligence of identifying number of devices connected, which one is free, what kind of code that we could assign to it, all of those can be offloaded, and we could see that shortly very soon. But that's how Appium 2.0 has evolved in its architecture.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, Srini. So you mean to say like it's like Lego blocks, right? So it's like a plugin. So you want to build something on top of something, you just keep adding bits to the core, right? So that's what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
That's going to be cool. I think this is something what 2.0 brings in place is going to be a great advantage to the community to to add flavors, to do what they want to do in terms of plugins, right?
Yeah.
Cool, cool. With that said, also, Srini, I've actually seen in my past experience, right? When it comes to drivers, so people would know what is UI automated to driver, espresso driver, right? Drivers are basically nothing but something which can drive your sandbox, right? So if you want to talk about it in the Selenium world for people to connect, right? Chrome driver is something what can talk to your browser. A Geeko driver can talk to your Firefox, right? Similar, there are drivers for us over here, right? So I know, Srini, in 1.x that any changes that we want to do, right, it has to be in the core module. So I can give you an example, right? I was working with one of the clients, and probably it was like sort of an IoT gig, okay, uh, where we were uh, where we were like sort of into Raspberry Pis, and we had to also write some level of automation for Raspberry Pis with that being a hardware, and also connecting that to into our apps. Okay, so we had this kind of integration. So we were trying to like sort of get Appium to work with Raspberry Pi, and we very clearly found out that to get things done, we'll have to hook these kind of drivers into the core module. So when I say core module, like the actual Appium code base, right? And of course, this Raspberry Pi being one of the cases is pretty useful to me. It might not be useful to any other people in this crowd, right? In this group. I mean, why would anyone want to have a Raspberry code sitting inside Appium, which is not fitting the purpose of Appium, right? Uh, and that seemed like a kind of lost path for me with 1.x when we wanted to do. But do you think, are there ways in 2.x where, like you said, plugins, right? Is there a way 2.0 brings in to also help us in these kind of drivers, Srini?
Yeah, I remember in past there were a lot of such requests came out. One such request was UI engine driver. So people building apps for UI engine, which is a UI TV app, they wanted to create their own custom driver. As you said, as you've gone through the pain of creating custom driver and then bringing it along with the Appium code base, it's going to be clumsy, or it was clumsy as well. So there was too many to and fro conversations between UI engine team and
Yeah, we lost him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Srini, we lost you again, Srini.
apologize. I'm not sure what's happening at the browser. So there were too many conversations with respect to changing a code in Appium code base, and then getting along the UI engine driver or supporting the UI engine driver. And there was no directions as well. There wasn't no documentations around how one could create a custom driver. Let's say, as you said about Raspberry Pi, there was a request from Samsung on Samsung driver for Samsung TV apps. So there wasn't clear directions or indications for someone who could create custom drivers for their own use cases or purposes. Appium 2 has decoupled this, and they are gonna, Appium 2 is also going to provide community with a template that they could use to create drivers for their own use cases, purposes, and probably even release their own versions without changing anything in Appium core code base. So it's going to be a lot more simpler and easier with proper directions and the documentations as well to someone who are quite interested on solving complex problems.
Cool. So which means with 2.0, I can unblock the problem what I saw previously of not being able to automate a Raspberry Pi using Appium. So I could, going forward, I could build my own drivers, right? That's what you're saying, Srini?
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
going to be
And
a lot
without,
simpler and easier.
okay.
Even with 1.x, we were able to create, but there were too many conversations we need to have with Appium maintainers, get the piece of code in there, lying around in the core code base, which may not be helpful, as you said, for other users in the community. But with 2.x, it's going to be easier, and they could release their own versions without making any changes in the Appium umbrella of drivers.
Oh, that's something I'm looking forward to try my hands there.
Now that we have heard about Appium 2 solving quite a lot of problems, well, let's see how does the architecture of Appium 2.x evolved from architecture of Appium 1.x. We talked about drivers, I mean the custom drivers, we talked about a plugin. So how does it works with the earlier picture that we have shown, right? So this is how it looks like with the same espresso driver architecture in 2.x. The client code is going to be same. So the way you created a session, it's going to be same. The way we interacted with the element, like driver.find element, blah, 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 and then send keys, click, however we performed interactions with the client, client code is going to be same. As I said, the client code is same, and now we are 100% WebDriver protocol, which means we are complying to the standard by 100%, which is client server communication between your script and the Appium server running in your machine is going to be WebDriver protocol. It's going to be on WebDriver protocol, and it's a W3C standard as well, which again, Selenium 4 went inside and probably adopted 100% of WebDriver protocol. So now that Selenium has been launched and quite successfully running out, Appium 2.x is going to be a WebDriver 100% protocol. What it means is some of the APIs developed as part of or documented as part of WebDriver protocol is going to be common or with, I mean, created with the thought process that it could suffice for any interface, not necessarily for browsers, not necessarily for a specific handset. It could be a stylus that could interact with. So the APIs are defined in such a way that it is common for any interface. So the same way, client and server communicates in WebDriver protocol, and Appium server sends a request by reading the capabilities of it to the Espresso driver. And Espresso driver, as we know, it will install an Espresso server as well on device, which takes care of communicating the events, which means sending a text, setting the value of the text in a text box, or performing a gesture from swipe up or swipe down. So which is going to be quite same. And
Shini, we lost you again. Hello, Shini?
yep, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Browser behaves weird. So we introduced something here called plugins, right? Some of the some of the requests might traverse through drivers, and some of the requests might traverse through plugins. Plugins might be a small piece of code. We will deep dive on where we could use plugin and how we could use plugins in a real demo shortly. But plugins can be a small piece of code, runs along with server, takes a small responsibility, which might be defined already, or which could be a new responsibility, right? So this is how the server request might go to either plugins or plugins or to driver, and driver might also transfer certain responsibilities to plugins. So this is on a nutshell how Appium architecture has evolved with decoupled drivers and plugin architecture. Maybe Sai, can you take us through what is driver in detail, and probably what is plugin as well?
Oh, yeah. So, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Finally, I could get my Zoom app working and I'm away from the browser. This is so relaxing for me now. Okay, so Appium drivers, right? So the way Srini put through what are drivers, how drivers can solve the problem for us, and what sort of problem they can solve in plugins, right? So with drivers, okay, Srini, can you just move to the next slide, please? Yeah, with drivers, right, you can create your own custom driver. Like one of the examples we spoke about, right, Raspberry Pi. I want to automate a Raspberry Pi, but I don't want to, and that's like a very specific use case for you, right? And you want to get that into the core modules. So you can keep that in isolation, create your own driver. Okay. And I mean, there could be a question, right? How do I create my own driver? Don't worry, there are enough. I see a dark screen. Is that something to do with mine, or can others see the screen?
I'm able to see the screen.
We can see the screen. Sir.
Probably someone else network. Cool. Okay. So in that case, right? How can I create a driver? Don't worry, there are documentations coming into play. There are multiple examples, so you could refer to some template examples to see how you want to create drivers. Okay. And with that said, once this driver is created, right, you don't have to even talk to the Appium's core team to say that, hey, I created this driver, I want to integrate it with Appium, core modules. So you don't have to do that. You are completely decoupled, you are completely isolated, you can create your own drivers. That's one part of it. Okay. And the second part of it is also our drivers, which are default drivers, right? Like UI automated to driver, espresso driver, and a lot of other drivers. We have Mac drivers and things like that, right? They are completely pulled out of 2.0. So when you go back and try to install Appium version 2, right? So you can just simply install Appium at next with it through npm. When you try to do that, it's going to bring you only bare minimal dependency downloads. Okay, a very bare skeleton. It will not bring you any drivers. It will not download Chrome driver, nor it will download UI automated driver, nor Espresso driver, nor an XUI, and a lot of other drivers. Okay, it's not going to do any of those. If you want a specific driver for your automation, you simply tell Appium, download this driver to me. There are commands to download and install these drivers. So we'll also look through those when we get to the demo part of the session. Okay, so that way you can actually make sure that whatever you need for your automation needs, you can only download and keep those drivers for us. Okay, Srini, let's see what is there for us in the plugins. So with plugins, right? So we spoke about drivers now. Okay, drivers are something which can drive an object, right? It's something like that. But with plugins, right? So what is plugin? How is plugin and a driver, different, right? So with plugin, a plugin can update Appium server object before even it starts listening to any request. Okay, I'll give an example over here. So let's say that so you have your capabilities, right? So that's something what everyone would know. Your desired capabilities in your Selenium world or in your Appium world, right? So you would simply say create a new driver instance, and it's just typically going to work for you, right? So with that said, let's say now as a part of this dependencies, right, you might want to add few more information, right? So you can do all of that in the plugin. And also with that, one more great stuff that plugins can also do is you can modify commands. Okay, so we'll take one more example with this modification of the code, right? So with the modification part, what we can do also is we'll take an example over here. So let's say it's a driver.findElement, right? Everyone would typically have this one line of code. Either you take the Selenium piece or you take the Appium, you will definitely have this line of code, right? You say driver.findElement and you find it by an ID or you find it by an XPath, right? So in that case, let's say you want to capture a screenshot after every click of a command. Okay, I'm just giving an example. Okay. In today's world, what we do is people with Java and TestNG, they try to have listeners and they try to write wrapper codes here and everything is handled by the client, right? Now, what if you can build a plugin, okay, and the plugin can like sort of intercept the find element request and say that I want to take a screenshot, and then I will tell Appium to execute the find element, right? So it's like you're modifying the actual find element execution part, right? So plugins can do that as well. And the next thing the plugin can also do is it can add, it can introduce new commands and it can distribute it. So what does this mean? So today your new command, right, is driver dot find element by ID and something you give and you say click. That's a command which is already existing. Okay, and basically, like how Srini said, it's a client server architecture, right? So any of these commands what you write in any client, right, like Java, Ruby, Python, anywhere, they all actually get to your Appium server through a request, right? And these requests are standardized, right? When you say find element, probably it will be a slash session element and an element ID and things like that. So let's say that you want to introduce a new endpoint itself on a whole to say that I want to get stats of my application, or probably I want to add a new endpoint which can connect to Kibana or probably Grafana for your reporting and things like that, right? So that way you can also add additional endpoints to the existing Appium score module. Okay, it's not only modifying a function, but also you can add additional endpoints to the Appium score module. Okay, Srini, can we move next? Right, before we jump into the driver and plugin use cases, right, probably I'll give a pause here so that as we are processing about driver, what a driver can do and what a plugin can do, if anyone wants to ask any questions, right, and if you think that you want to come out on audio and ask us, please raise your hands, we can allow you in to ask your question. I'll give a pause for about probably another 10 to 15 seconds. So if anyone has got any questions with regards to the drivers or anything until what we covered now, and not hold it up till last, because probably you could have lost some context there. So we'll give some space here for you to ask questions. If anyone wants to come on audio, please raise your hand. We will let you in.
Also, Sai, I see some questions in the Q&A section.
Okay, cool. So probably we'll take that up very quickly. Srini, we'll take that up, right, very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I can actually see only one, probably because I moved from web to.
I could see one as well. Probably we'll go through that. It's from Vashik. Is swipe gestures simplified in Appium 2.x? Since 1.x, there were plenty of complex logic we need to write to do a simple swipe gesture on screen or an element. I was thinking if this complexity has been looked into in 2.x by creating some helper methods to perform such swipe. My question is more specific to Appium Java client. Cool. From maybe I can take that up, Sai.
Yeah.
So with Appium 1.x, we were in, as we all know, we were mostly on JSON via protocol. And with Appium 2.x, we are trying to be 100% compliance for WebDriver protocol, right? So WebDriver has introduced an API called Actions API. So if you have used touch actions in past, it's all going to be cleaned up, it's deprecated, and it could be removed any moment in the latest versions of any client that we use, be it Java client, Python client, or anything. Actions API was designed in mind for any interfaces. It could be for browser, or it could be for your stylus, or it could be for any touch interface that we could see, right? So Actions API is, by the look of it, it looks complex, but it has the capability to perform any kind of gesture that you could do. You could.
We lost him there again. Yeah, Srini, we lost you again, Srini. Okay, meanwhile, I'll probably take the next one, right? Do we have any specific changes or
Sorry,
support in?
On mute.
Oh, yeah. Srini, you were dropped off, so you want to continue? Then I'll take the next one.
Sure. So we
Yeah,
can perform any kind of gestures having Appium Actions API in mind. So as we talked about plugins, me and Sai have created a plugin for gestures to simplify the complexity that gestures brought in. So you need to have good understanding about how does gestures works on different drivers. To simplify this, we have brought in a plugin called Appium Gestures plugin, wherein you could say, let's say for drag and drop, you could say the element one, the source element and destination element, which could eventually, uh, the gestures plugin will eventually do the drag and drop for you without writing any complex logic. And these are offloaded from client, because if you are implementing something on client, you have to implement on all the type of languages that Appium supports, right, for anyone to use. So that responsibility was offloaded from client to server. So we have a plugin now, so you could use plugin, you could come back, contribute for any of the gestures that are missing there. And probably it's going to be quite simple using gestures if you use that plugin. So you want to add something?
No, you added pretty much all of it there.
Cool. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, someone's asked, is there any documentation of how to create a plugin? Yes, I would say there's a documentation for plugin and driver. So I'll also put it in the chat. So I've put in for the drivers, and I'm also hunting for the doc for the plugin as well. So I'll also add that. And the next is do we have any specific changes or a support in 2.x with respect to Dockerization of Appium test? It's not an easy task as of now. To be pretty straightforward, Krish, the answer is no, because 2.0 is not focusing more on Dockerizing any of these bits, but we are focusing more on how to make the server or Appium as a module easier to people to contribute as well as build things on top. So the answer here is going to be a straight no for it. I did see plenty of questions previously before I jumped out of the web. I'm not sure if everyone can. Jagdish, can you also see more questions, or even you can see just 2 or 3?
Yeah, I'm able to see more number of questions. And Idala, can you call out the questions? Okay, I will take it. The first question is that, is there any native support for parallel testing in Appium 2?
There is no native support, but we have plugins. We have built a plugin, so probably we're going to take that as a demo to show how building a plugin can also help. So there's no native support, but definitely there's a plugin support.
Going to the next question from anonymous attendee. Question to Sai and Srini. So as currently we can see Appium server GUI is using 1.x and Appium inspector is using Appium R2.x. So that things resolved in Appium 2.x like server and inspector are aligned.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I mean, I would say this is nothing related to Appium 2.x. Even today, if you go back, you would see something called as Appium Desktop, which has got a node and a specific version of server bundled. You would also see something called as Appium Inspector. So Appium Inspector is just a bare bone. It only inspects elements, right? So which means any version of server running in your command line, it can connect to that and it can simply inspect. So the answer is, the Appium Inspector is a way of going forward. So we would recommend people to go forward and use Appium Inspector if you don't want to bring in server dependencies. If you're using Appium Desktop, that's going to be hooked to a specific version of server. And Appium Inspector is independent. So whichever server you're going to run in your command line, just connect to that. It's going to work.
So I think we have answered every question.
Awesome. Fantastic. I will still be open to see if anyone wants to ask any questions. Raise your hand. Jagdish is going to let you in so you can ask your questions. Oh, it's not me. I just try to see if that can work. Yeah. Okay. Hands down. Anyone? I clearly see.
Hey folks, it's an interactive session and
yeah, because the kind of information that me and Srini are actually sharing in terms of drivers and plugins is something where you might not find a lot over the internet, because this is at very early stage and we've got our hands dirty on it being co-contributors. So probably I would say utilize this time the most to understand more, and we are open to take as many questions as possible. Okay. So with that said, I don't see anyone coming up. So I believe we have put things in a very nice way that people can understand, right? Let's jump in, okay? Let's jump into demo. A quick time check, Jagdish, because we started late. I know we have, we're still not sticking to the same time, right? So what's the time left for us?
ideally we're almost 10 to the call. It's half an hour time we have.
We have 30 minutes more. Okay, cool. Okay, before we jump into, we'll
There's
straight away
one
jump
last
into the demo.
question. So you want to take it at the end, or you
Yeah,
want it?
go ahead, go
Yeah,
ahead.
let's
Anyways, we
go
gave
for
a
it.
pause. Shini, go for it, Shini.
Is 2.20 backward compatible?
Pretty much the test that you have written on clients, let's say you have written on a recent client, let's say the latest version of Java client, it's going to be compatible with maybe bare minimum changes, adding a base path by yourself to move forward to 2.0. Or if you want to move backward, probably you might have to add that base path. So it's pretty much compatible. But the support for Appium 1.x was withdrawn quite some time back. As I said, we are in beta version 40 now, and we will probably hit another couple of versions of beta, and any issues that users or community faces is going to be fixed on a specific driver, which is the part of 2.x. So it's 1.x is no longer going to be maintained.
Yeah, and with that said, right, I know generally when people hear about beta, right, they go panic, right? Oh, it's beta, I don't want to use it. So, but this beta, when we say it's not exactly the sort of beta we think, because there are a lot of work for it to come out of beta to alpha. There are a lot of documentation work still left out, or some architectural changes, right? So, keeping all of that in mind, I would recommend or I would suggest people please move forward with 2. Don't stick to 1.x thinking it is still in beta. The reason is because the way your test would still work. Under the hood, there is no logical changes which has taken place. It's only more of an architectural changes, like how we saw, right, with server coming in with drivers and plugins and few stuffs like that. That's the only one under the hood changes. But from a client or from a user perspective, your test code still remains the same, and the way it could still find an element is going to be the same for you. Okay. Okay.
Just to add to Sai, the cloud vendors were also being communicated quite long back. So they are also actively working on catching up with 2.0 beta X, basically. So when beta is out from beta to stable, you will always also have probably most of the vendors supporting Appium 2 as well.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, can we jump into demo?
Yeah.
And see some cool stuff working, and some of the CLI server args changes and stuff like that. Okay, let's see if my screen share works fine now. Give me a second. Let me share my full screen. Let me know if this is visible or it's a little
Yes.
tiny and things like that. It's all okay, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's my terminal. Let me make it it's visible. Good, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I have 2 emulators booted already, just to save some time. Okay, the first thing that we want to look, right? So we did say that Appium server is bare minimal and it comes with nothing. So we have to install the drivers what you need, and you also need to install the plugins what you need, right? So let's look at what are the commands currently in 2.0 Appium CLI is got. Okay, so you see, so if you look at it, right, so drivers, like, it's going to typically list out the drivers what is available, which is officially maintained by Appium, and also it's going to list out the drivers which I have installed in my machine. Okay, so if you actually look through it, right, over here, this is clearly saying, hey, these are all the drivers which is available. Okay, and it says list of available devices, UI automated 2 is installed and XUI is installed. So I've installed it because I wanted these two to be a part of my journey. And you see this UI engine, Windows, Espresso, Flutter, Safari, Gecko is not installed because I don't need them, because I'm only focusing to run my test on UI automated 2 or XUI test. Okay, so I just installed only those two, and I've just ignored all of the other things. Okay, and then when it comes to how do you install a driver, right? So there are multiple ways to install a driver. Okay, so you simply say driver, Appium driver install, and you can actually tell where you want this to be installed from. Okay, so you could install it from your source. So if you see a help, right, if you say Appium driver help, this will actually tell you what are the next arguments that you need to provide to install your driver. So there are plenty of ways that you can install a driver. You can install your driver from your local, you can install your driver from NPM, you can install your driver from GitHub, right? So let's say Jagdish built a driver, but he hasn't published the driver, but you want to use this driver, right? Because it's something interesting and pretty cool. So that way you simply install it saying that, hey, the source is going to be GitHub and this is my GitHub URL, right? So Appium will actually know that, okay, I have to go find this specific plugin in GitHub and it's going to download it from GitHub. There are multiple sources and there are documentations for this. So I'm not going to go too deep to talk about each of these, but that's how you typically install these drivers. Okay. And a similar way, you also install the plugins as well. So you say Appium plugin install, and you simply specify the plugin name and the source, right? Again, saying that if my plugin is in NPM, you say the source is NPM and you say the plugin name, right? Whatever the author of the plugin, you specify the plugin name. Okay. So it's the same. See over here, it says list of plugins. If you want to install, say install with the plugin name and things like that. Okay, cool. Okay. So with this said, right, we spoke a lot about drivers. We spoke a lot about plugins. Me and Srini have built a plugin. Okay, and when someone asked a question, right, hey, is there any native support in 2.x to help us with parallel execution to make things easier, right? We did say that there's no native support, but definitely there's a plugin that we have built for it. So let's go ahead and see how you can automate this plugin when you're running your Appium server, and what does this plugin would do for us, okay? So generally what you people do is you would say Appium and you hit the button that could typically start your server for us, right? That's what you do in Appium 1.x. But whereas in Appium 2, you have to give certain CLIs if you want to activate your driver or if you want to activate your plugin. Okay, that's exactly what we are actually going to see now. Okay, so for me right now, I'm going to take this. Okay, so that's going to be the command, what you see. Okay, come on, give me a minute. Let me clear my terminal, right? Okay, that's my command. Okay, so if you clearly see, right, the way this command actually says is, it says Appium server over here, and let me box it up, right? Yeah, it says Appium server, and I've given an argument saying -k and 800, so that's more like keep alive, right? You want to keep the session alive for X seconds or minutes, and then I say -- use plugins, right? That's a new thing which you have to say. So I'm going to say that, hey, I want to use a plugin called device farm and an element wait. Okay, so that means I've already installed these two plugins in my machine, and I'm going to use these two plugins. Basically, I'm going to activate them, right? I'm going to use them. Okay, and this is the change what you actually see in the current Appium 2 is you have to specify a base path. So in 1.x, you don't have to give any base path, right? It would simply directly take a /wd hub. But here, when you start your Appium 2.0, you have to give the base path. Okay, and there are some plugin arguments. Ignore this. This is very specific to. So this is specific to the plugin. Okay, so the important thing to note over here is you say Appium server and then give it whatever arguments which the server has actually got today, and -- use the plugins. Okay, so this is to use a plugin, and if you want to use a driver, you simply say -- use driver, and you just give the driver name. As simple as that. Okay, and right now I'm saying that I want to use a device farm plugin and an element wait plugin. Okay, so let's go ahead and like sort of very quickly start the server. Okay, stop annotating. So I'm going to simply say I'm going to run it only on Android. So this plugin device farm platform, what you see is not something with Appium 2.0. This is something which is very closely tied up to the plugin. The plugin is saying that, hey, if you don't give me this specific argument, I might not understand where should I distribute my test, right? So that is something very closely tied to the plugin and not to the actual Appium 2.0. Okay, so let's go ahead and then simply start the server. So we will wait for the server to begin, and we'll see what are the information that the server logs are going to give us. Okay, so it's attempting to start some stuff. Let's give it some time. Okay, so we have some kind of information, right? So let's annotate and see what are these informations, right? If you see over here, it sort of tells that, hey, I'm trying to load the plugin called device farm. because we told, use plugins over here, it has considered that and it's saying I'm going to load this specific plugin, right? And you also see it has actually taken this stuff saying use plugins device farm. Okay. And the base path is also considered in this specific space. Okay. And then if I scroll a bit down onto the screen, right, let's see some very interesting information over here. Okay. And what are this information that we typically want to see is this, right? Over here, attempting to load driver UI automated 2 and XCUI driver. The reason it is trying to load these two is because I've installed those two. So it's trying to load those two, right? There could also be a case that you want to have both. Let's say you want to have both in your pipeline, okay, your Jenkins, your CI. But when you run your test, you might want to only use Android, right? So you simply say, like the way we used -- use plugins, you say -- use drivers, only UI automated 2. So at that point, it will not load both, it will only load one. Okay, so you clearly see Appium's trying to load that specific driver as well for us. Okay, and the next important thing to note in our server logs is this part. Okay, you see over here, right? Over here, it clearly says that. Sorry, this part, right? It clearly says that I have two plugins. Okay, I've installed two plugins in my local. One is Appium Dashboard and another one is called Device Farm. Okay, but I've explicitly told Appium, hey, I only want to activate Device Farm. So I don't want to use the Appium Dashboard as a plugin. I've installed it, but I don't want to use it, right? And it also clearly calls out saying this is active for us over here. Okay, so if you see, it clearly says this is active. So that's the plugin which is currently active in my machine right now. Okay, cool. So now let's look at our test, right? To sort of parallelize it. The server is running and it's trying to print some sort of information. Let's not worry about it right now. So let's see how my client code looks, okay, when I'm trying to parallelize over here. So let me close some unnecessary files and let me open the test, right? I'm sure these kind of tests is something is a very simple one where people can understand, right? You see, it's a simple bare bone test over here. There's nothing magical written here to say run it parallel. There's a lot of logic written. We're not specifying what device you want to run the test or what's the port number. There are so many other required information. We have not written any of those, right? This is like a very, very straightforward use case, right? You see, it's a bare minimal capability that we are writing over here, okay? We do a bare minimal capability. We say, hey, yeah, the platform's going to be Android. I want to use UI Automated 2 as my driver because, of course, it's Android. And I'm also giving it an app path, right? That's simple. I'm not specifying which device and other information. And you see, even my test, right? My test is also pretty simple. All that it is saying is I'm just taking the driver instance and I'm going to click on it, right? So I'm not telling, hey, you have to use a driver of device 1 or driver of device 2. You see that the sort of complexity which is reduced on the client side specifically, right? It's a very simple test which anyone can understand, has no magical code here to run your test in parallel, okay? And let's look at, another test, right? So let's go into another test over here. And if you look into the other test, it's the same simple test, right? It's the same test. I've just had it here, probably with another click just to differentiate it, okay? And I have a third one, which is in iOS. So let's ignore iOS for now with just looking at the time. So I'm not going to run the iOS test for now, okay? So let's say I'm going to ignore that as a spec file. So I have two tests, okay? I'll split this into two so that people can see it clearly. So I have two tests over here. One is a conf test. Oops. One is a conf test, and another one is conf2 spectre test. Okay. What they basically do is they are.
Sai, there is a request. Can you increase the font size a bit?
Is it okay?
Or probably maximize the window as well for some time.
It's not too visible, is it? Is it fine now?
Yeah, bit better.
Is okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. We're talking about these two tests, right? Okay, these two tests. Sweet. So if you see, look at this, right? We just have an identical test, okay, but with different, probably different clicks and stuff like that, right? But they are having the same kind of capabilities. saying Android and UI automated too, they don't have any magical arguments provided like UDID or device name and port numbers and things like that, right? It's a very simple simple test over here. So let's go ahead and run this test, right? Let's go ahead and run this test and also see with this how does this plugin help to parallelize these tests against two devices. Okay, so I have two devices and let me split the window. Okay, I will slightly reduce this now for now as we run the test.
So the plugin will also keep polling for the number of devices connected. Let's say if a new device comes up, it gets automatically added to the bucket as well. So Sai has two devices open, two emulators open and running now. So if he kills one of the device, it will automatically delete it from the device pool.
Okay. You see, it actually tried to do an app, the Appium setting installations and stuff there. You see two apps popping up. So we'll give it some time to install our test app as well on these two devices. Okay. Okay, you saw that the app is installed and it is trying to launch on these two devices. Ah, crap. Probably didn't have enough time to boot that up. Let's just simply add some weight over here. Okay. I don't bother much. It's because my emulator is running for a while, and that's the reason. Okay.
We also have built another plugin to remove these kind of weights. So, which is something called Appium weight plugin.
Yeah, maybe the next one we can just activate that as well as in like sort of look through me. And you see, it is actually it went into two different screens, right? They typically run parallelly. It went into two different screens just to make sure that, just to show you folks, it has actually also printed this part. Let me also show you something pretty cool. What this plugin also does with this, as we are running, right? Let me also go to my browser, okay? And I'm going to hit localhost 4723 and /device farm, okay? And you see that we have also exposed a dashboard.
Sai, are you sharing something?
Oh,
We need to get
yeah.
that in.
Yeah, I'm able to see Srini, the Chrome window.
Yeah, the Chrome, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we have two devices and you see it turned out to be busy. So which means it clearly says that these two devices are busy executing the test cases right now. Okay. And once the test cases completes, right, executing, you would see the state of busy changing to, available for us. Right, the tests have done and you see it immediately went to ready state. So it also gives you dashboard which can tell you these kind of stuffs. All of this is something what the plugin is giving us. So you could see, right, the kind of superpower that a plugin can give us, getting it tied to Appium. So Appium is driving your test, but the plugin is doing a lot of cool stuff for us. Srini, anything else you want to add to the demo part, Srini? You want to show anything?
Nope, if you have element weight, maybe we can try that out.
Okay, cool. So let's try another cool stuff, right?
And this plugin supports both Android and iOS. It's not just with simulators or emulators. It does supports real devices, be it any platform. It could be Android or iOS, or it could be both. You have the option to run both. As you could see, Sai has given plugin device form platform equal to Android. Instead of that, you could specify iOS, or probably you could also specify both. So it will automatically pick up all the emulators available in Sai's machine. And if he has connected any real device, it will get that as well. So you don't have to worry about what kind of device is connected, or whether it is a simulator, emulator. Everything is taken care of by the plugin itself.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to see if I already have an element weight plugin in my machine. So very clearly it says I do not have one. So probably I'm going to install Srini, and this also probably will show people how to install. So you say Appium plugin install
Source,
hyphen
hyphen
source
source.
npm, right?
Yep.
And we say element weight, is it?
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Correct.
Okay.
So the idea
So
behind building this plugin by me and Sai were about we all might have started with thread.sleeps or browser.parsers everywhere, right? So the code gets very clumsy, and then Selenium has extended couple of APIs for implicit wait and explicit wait, right? So the thought process behind this plugin of element weight is to remove all those clumsy codes. So keep focusing on the flow rather than waiting for something to be available, rather than waiting for something to be editable. So the scope of this plugin is quite heavy, but currently it checks for display, and you can add as many conditions as also possible. And you could remove all the weights that you have in your application. I mean, your automation script.
just give it some
Also,
time.
in the interest of time, there is a question in the Q&A section.
Can we
Can you
set this device form in remote machine and access the devices from our local machine? So it's one of the feature that me and Sai had thought through. We have this in our backlog. So we have built another or a project called Appium Test Distribution, which kind of does quite a lot of heavy lifting for performing parallel distribution or distribution of tests across the real devices or emulators or simulator connected in either in your device, or I mean either in your own Mac or in your own Windows, or let's say you have your server running on your device and you have devices connected on some other Mac or Windows. You could do all of these things like remotely distribute, remotely parallelize your tests using Appium test distribution project. We have this feature in our backlog for our Appium device form as well, but currently it doesn't support remote distributions basically.
There are two more questions I can see, Srini. Is Appium free to use? Yes, Appium is free to use. It's open source. You can use it for free. And can we use this plugin in cloud? Sauce Labs browser stack in cloud. I want to target particular devices. How it can be achieved? Because from what I see, a script runs on all connected devices. Srini, did you answer this, or you took another other question?
I took another one which is
Okay,
on the chat.
so there are two parts to this question, right? One is, can we use this plugin in cloud? The answer is no. The reason it's a no, because the cloud vendor should open up opportunities on their side to see how they want to use Appium 2 and its plugin and driver architecture. So which currently I have not heard from any cloud providers. Okay, so the first part of the answer is no. The second part to your question over here is the first part to your question is no. How can it be achieved? Because what I see is scripts run on all connected devices. Yes, the current scripts run on all, not all the connected devices. So there are also capabilities within the plugin where you can also say that, hey, if there are 10 devices, just run it on 3 devices or 4 devices, right? So you can specify what are those 4-5 devices that you want to run through a capability. If you get to GitHub and this repository, and if you can look through the README, you will find the other options that can happen. I hope I answered your question, Dinesh, there. I think my internet's pretty slow and this plugin is taking quite long. So I'm going to skip this plugin. I just allow that to be installed, Srini. I hope that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Also,
Again, with
this
the
plugin
interest of
has a
everybody.
capability to, the device form plugin has the capability to queue your tests. Let's say you have 5 tests and you have only 2 devices connected or 2 emulators running. And you want to run all 5 tests in parallel. So the 3 session creation will be queued up, and then as soon as the device gets freed up from the execution, it picks the session from the queue and then runs the tests.
Yeah.
Probably you can try this element weight plugin. It's quite simple. uh, Maybe I will leave the URL here. So feel free to try that out and share your feedback so that we could get things better. And if you would like to contribute, feel free to share your feature requests as well.
Yeah. Come on, my system with two emulators running is and Zoom. I think it's slowly getting into end of
It's
life
going to be
now.
crazy. Yeah.
Let's see the amount of time that Appium server is taking to launch. Let's give it like few more seconds and see if it can really do stuff.
And if you have any questions, meanwhile, feel free to drop.
Yeah, meanwhile we can take up the questions, people.
So do you want to share some of the community maintained plugins as well, and
Yeah,
also
yeah, that's a
plugins
good
that
thing
we
to jump
have?
in. Yeah, as this is going to do something, probably we can do that. Okay, okay.
Want me to share?
No, I have it. You want to take this up, Srini?
Yeah. So some of the plugins were built by Appium maintainers themselves, and it lies inside our core code base. For example, image plugin, which takes care of finding an element through an image. I remember this was a capability introduced by Appium in 1.x as a core driver.find element by image or so. So now that version being extracted, we felt that it's not something that's required to be a not a candidate for to be in a core code base. So it's extracted and maintained now as a separate plugin. So image plugin is that, and relaxed capabilities. So it's another plugin maintained by our Appium maintainers. And if you want to, instead of using again, another plugin maintained by our maintainers were about the universal XML plugin. So which is kind of helpful to stream it. I mean, instead of basically instead of going through JSONs, this kind of helps us to go through as XMLs, which is kindly, I mean, which is currently not been maintained effectively by our team. So doesn't give us enough use cases for us to apply this plugin. So the other three plugins that we have is Appium Weight, Appium Device Form. Appium Weight is nothing but the element weight which Sai is trying to install, which kind of removes all the clumsy code like find element, I mean, waiting for that element, waiting for that element to get displayed, so and so. All these kind of clumsy weights that you could keep it as your helpers or keeping it in your test can be removed out if we use this plugin. And the next one is device form, which Sai has demonstrated just now, which takes care of parallelizing your request and distributing your test across multiple devices connected. And the last one is Appium Gestures plugin. So which kind of simplifies how we could perform gestures using Actions API. So it does provides all the heavy lifting instead of doing clients doing an heavy lifting for each gesture. Appium gesture plugin does the heavy lifting, and you could perform probably drag and drop, swipe gesture, horizontal or vertical swipe with just, uh, I mean, instead of writing the whole sequence by the user, the sequence can be written by the gesture now. You can just instruct the gesture plugin to do so. So these are some of the main plugins that are maintained by both community and as well as by the Appium core team as well.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Srini. Let's jump into some of the benefits, right, that Appium 2.0 brings in. Oh, here is it's more like what we saw. Of course, decoupled drivers from Appium server, which of course helps us users to install only specific Appium drivers of the choice that you need. So basically, what you ask is what you get, and also you create custom Appium drivers is going to be a lot easier, like we already saw for some of the things like plugin and minor updates or bug fixes, right, to any Appium driver would be available quickly for you. So you don't have to wait for the major version of Appium to be released to have your bug fix. If there's a bug fix in one of the drivers in one of the modules, so that will be independently released and you can update them independently and not wait for the major version of Appium to be bumped in. Okay, and these are some of the benefits that 2.0 brings in terms of the architectural changes. And that's pretty much what we have for the day. Thank you. you so much, people. We are still open for questions if you want to hear more. And meanwhile, I'm still trying to see if the element weight can work.
Please post your questions in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand and you can ask questions. And I can add you. No questions. So I just will send out another poll of how many people are interested to try out the new Appium 2.0. I'll give 1 minute time, and also people can post their questions in the meantime. Sai, there's a question in the Q&A section. Srini, can you answer this?
Yep.
So if you feel we need to create plugin, do we have any documentation or guideline to follow?
So the documentation is something that's still cooking. So we have a few bare minimum stuff as of now, but before we hit stable release in market, we would like to have a detailed documentation in terms of how one could create a driver and how one could create a custom plugin, for example. So it's all going to be out pretty soon. It's been said touch actions class will be deprecated and need to start using action. So it's not an actions class, just a correction. It's action API from WebDriver.
Okay, I see.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, Srini.
Srini.
Hey,
Just
Jagdish, do you want Jagdish?
Yeah.
Do you want to get Dinesh on audio? It looks like he's got a lot of follow-up questions. Dinesh, do you mind coming on audio, Dinesh? Or just probably raise your hand if you're okay with it. Jagdish can let you in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he did. Can you let him in, Jagdish?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Dinesh.
Yeah, hi Dinesh.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my doubt is, it's been said that in from APM 2.0, touch actions will be deprecated and actions will be start. We have to start using actions. But from currently in 1.x, actions will be we can use actions only in web view, right? In native view, the actions we don't have much support with the actions. We need to rely on touch actions. So from APM 2.0, will actions will give support for native view as well, or is there some
So a small correction here. So it's not actions class that Selenium exposes, right? You might have
okay.
what we are talking about is an action API exposed by WebDriver protocol, right?
Okay.
So it's probably if you have used Appium, you might have seen a function called perform. So this
Yeah.
function called perform is helpful to perform an action, right? For that action to be performed, you need to create a sequence. Like I have to move a finger and then drop that finger in a
Yes.
particular location. So you could build that sequence using sequence class and send that sequence object to perform. So it will perform that. So this API is exposed through action API from WebDriver protocol. So the touch action, the actions class is a bit different. The touch action that we are talking about will not help us to create a complex gesture. Let's say I wanted to do a signature. signature in a screen is going to be pretty complex, right? So you can't do those kind of gestures using touch action API, and it's quite brittle. So that's one of the reason why it's deprecated in favor of action API. Maybe you can share with you a sample gesture. How does an action API look like? Probably in chat.
Yeah, sure, that will help. Maybe I will try from my side.
Definitely. Just give me a couple of seconds. You could see that link there.
Any other question, Dinesh, or we have other question in the Q&A?
No, from my side, Jagdish.
Thank you.
you.
So there's another question in the Q&A section. It's from Prudvi. In iOS using Appium, when element not displayed on screen, it's failing. Can we do auto scroll till element is found, something similar to how Selenium works in Chrome?
So again, it depends on the iOS version. So there are multiple ways you could handle it. One, through the locator strategy itself, using predicate, where you could say visibility is equal to 1. That will help you to wait until that element comes out. So you could handle it through multiple ways. So, or you could, as you said, you wanted to wait until, I mean, there are two things that we are talking about. Element not displayed is something, a common problem in iOS and different versions of iOS to be exact, right? That could be handled through either is displayed, which is sometimes flaky on versions of iOS. And instead of using is displayed API, you could also use visible equal to 1 in predicate locator strategy of iOS. That's another way. And probably to auto scroll, there are certain native mobile commands provided by iOS. You could use mobile colon scroll to perform a scroll without depending on a particular element. So you could use those native mobile commands, which doesn't belong to WebDriver or W3C protocol. These are over and above the WebDriver protocol provided by the native features, like for example, Apple themselves and Google themselves. So you could use mobile colon scroll from Appium iOS and perform that gesture.
Yeah, hope would be your question is answered. So if you want to also like pitch in and ask question, you can ping in the chat and I can add you in. Any more questions from others? Yeah. Dinesh, I'm lowering your hand. Let me know if you need to come in and raise again. Raise the hand again.
If you have any other queries, please feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, so I'll be ending this session. Before that, I would say that was a great and a very interactive session about Appium 2.x. The way you explained from the basics to how Appium 2.x solves our issues we face using Appium 1.x. So till the end, including the live demo, it was very interesting to all of us to listen to. And thank you for sharing it with us. And we've learned a lot. It was a great learning session, Sai and Srini. So thanks a lot. And I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously helped us to make this event a great success. And extending my thanks to the organizers, Jagdish and Idala, Casey, Nal, Biswajit, and our speakers, Sai and Srini. And yeah, Jagdish will also be putting a feedback link in the chat. So please go through it and provide us your feedback so that it will be very helpful for us to inculcate it better from the next time. And yeah, we'll also be sharing the PPTs, GitHub links, and YouTube links, and the recording of today's session through the mails. So thank you all.
Thanks, Sai and Shini. It's
Thank
a
you, people.
really great
Thanks
session.
for
Thank you,
joining.
people. Thanks for joining and listening to us.
Thank you.